All right, let's talk about tipping. Love it or hate it, it's a deeply ingrained part of American culture. And honestly, for many, it's a source of constant frustration. We've all been there, right? Staring down that tablet, wondering if we should tip for a coffee, a takeout order, or even just for someone handing you a pre-packaged sandwich. It's called tipping fatigue, and it's real. So when a new bill called No Tax on Tips pops up, promising to help our hardworking service industry folks, it sounds like a no brainer, right? More money in their pockets, less for the IRS. Who could argue with that? But as with most things in politics, the devil is in the details. This isn't just about a simple tax break. It's about a fundamental debate over wages, employer responsibility, and the very structure of our service economy. On the surface, it looks like a win-win, but when you peel back the layers, you start to see some interesting and frankly questionable aspects of this solution. We're going to dive into this no tax on tips provision, look at who it actually benefits, who it leaves behind, and whether it's a genius stroke of policy or just another band aid on a much deeper wound. Get ready to have some of your assumptions challenged because this conversation is anything but straightforward. Let's get into it.
I'm Colin Sheedy. I work front of house at Burger Stand in Lawrence. I've been a tip worker for about 5 years, so I think the prospect of having to pay less in taxes is enticing.
The new no tax on tips provision in the One Big Beautiful Bill allows tipped employees to deduct up to $25,000 from their federal tax filing each year. The program began in 2025 and is in place through 2028. This provision will increase average take-home pay for tipped workers by $1,300 a year.
But I think this is something that will be powerful, will be popular, people will like. And I have a high level of confidence that Congress is going to extend it.
Okay, so right out of the gate, we're hearing about a potential $1,300 annual increase for tipped workers and the confidence that Congress will extend it. On the surface, who wouldn't be excited about that? An extra $1,300 in your pocket without having to ask your boss for a raise. Sign me up. It sounds like a fantastic win for the everyday server, bartender, or delivery driver. But here's where my neutral leaning, let's poke holes in this brain, kicks in. While that $1,300 is certainly appealing, it feels a lot like putting a fancy new spoiler on a car that still has a flat tire. It addresses a symptom, the tax burden on tips, but it sidesteps the fundamental issues that make tipping such a volatile and often unfair system in the first place. Think about it. This bill is essentially saying, hey, we know the system is kind of broken, so instead of fixing the core problem, we'll just make one part of it slightly less painful. It's like giving someone a discount on their expensive car repairs instead of addressing why their car keeps breaking down. It's a temporary relief, but it doesn't build a more stable, predictable income for these workers. And the confidence that Congress will extend it, well, that's a political prediction. And we all know how those usually go. Today's popular provision can easily become tomorrow's budget cut. So while the immediate relief is tempting, we need to ask, is this truly solving the problem or just making us feel better about a system that still needs a serious overhaul?
But not everyone is excited about the new policy.
Then I kind of did like 30 minutes of research and my opinion changed pretty quickly. It's really just meant to kind of save so that employers continue to pay at sub-minimum wage, and then the burden goes on to the customers that they have to pay basically your wage.
This comes as customers are growing weary of tipping encounters. Data shows nearly 9 out of 10 Americans believe tipping has gotten out of control.
I know being a counter service restaurant, tip fatigue is very real, not just for our business, our industry, but across all industries.
We're the only country in the world that has this system of tipping that forces customers to pick up the tab for workers' wages. Adding this no tax on tips provision into the tax code just exacerbates the system.
37% of tipped workers face zero federal income tax burden, so they would receive no benefit from no tax on tips as it's presently written.
Low-income households do not benefit from no tax on tips because they already don't pay federal income tax, and they get the double whammy on the back end of Medicaid and other social services cuts that were passed as part of the bill.
CNBC went to the burger stand in Lawrence, Kansas to find out how no tax on tips is impacting their business and what it means for the future of tipping in the U.S.
Joseph, I got some food in the back for you, Joseph.
Nevadans, our families, we're being squeezed, and they need real relief. They need us to work together to lower costs for them. That's why I introduced the No Tax on Tips Act alongside Senator Ted Cruz from Texas, which would eliminate federal income taxes on tipped wages.
Here's how no tax on tips works. Tipped earners will be able to deduct up to $25,000 from their federal income when they file annually. Individuals earning $150,000 or $300,000 for joint filers are disqualified. No tax on tips ends in 2028, and tips must be voluntary and not be a part of negotiation, like service charges or auto gratuities.
And the idea, I have to give 100% of the credit to President Trump.
No tax on tips. No tax on tips.
He says the waitress comes up to him and he says she seemed stressed, and he asked her, what's wrong? And she said, well, it's just such a hassle paying taxes on tips. It's incredibly burdensome. And Trump said, he just wrote down on a piece of paper, he said, no tax on tips. I said, what do you think of that? She said, fantastic.
All right, so we're hearing the origin story straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. President Trump, a stressed waitress, a piece of paper, and bam, no tax on tips. It's a story that's almost too perfect, isn't it? A simple solution to a complex problem born from a single relatable interaction. It certainly makes for a great soundbite and an even better campaign rally cheer. But let's be real for a second. While I appreciate the sentiment of wanting to help a worker, reducing a multi-layered tax policy to a spontaneous napkin idea feels a little simplistic. It minimizes the years of debate, economic analysis, and legislative wrangling that usually go into significant tax changes. It's like saying you designed a skyscraper by sketching it on a cocktail napkin during a flight. Sure, the idea might start there, but the execution is a tad more involved. And the waitress's reaction, fantastic. Of course, it's fantastic. Who wouldn't want to pay less in taxes? But does that fantastic response truly capture the full spectrum of economic impacts, the fairness questions, or the long-term sustainability of such a policy? Probably not. It's a gut reaction, an emotional appeal, which, let's face it, is incredibly effective in politics. This anecdote, while charmingly direct, sidesteps the larger issues. It frames the problem as simply paying taxes on tips is a hassle, rather than relying on unpredictable tips for a living wage in a system that often pays sub-minimum wage is the real hassle. It's a classic case of addressing the visible irritation instead of the underlying systemic issue. And that, my friends, is a pattern we're going to see a lot with this bill.
So I came back to this office right here. I assembled my tax team together. I said, let's write. Let's draft the legislation to make the president's idea a reality.
No tax on tips was originally introduced as a standalone bill and passed the Senate with unanimous consent.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
But was eventually folded into the overall One Big Beautiful Bill as a provision to be enacted when Americans file in 2026. The IRS has provided penalty relief for tax year 2025 as taxpayers adjust to the new policy. Lawmakers and tax and restaurant industry insiders point to several groups that are set to benefit from the no tax on tips provision.
Small businesses are actually going to benefit from policies like removing taxes on tips because it allows their employees to get a pay raise, effective pay raise in their take-home pay, right? Without the employer having to actually incur any of those costs.
Nevada is one state that's championed the bill.
This is where the argument starts to get a little squishy. The claim that small businesses benefit because employees get an effective pay raise without the employer incurring any cost. That's a classic political sleight of hand. It sounds great, like free money for everyone, but someone always pays, right? In this case, the cost isn't directly incurred by the employer, but it's certainly incurred by the broader tax base. When the government reduces its revenue from tipped workers, that money has to come from somewhere else. It either means higher taxes for other citizens, cuts to public services, or most likely an increase in the national debt. So it's not cost free. It's just a cost shifted away from the employer and onto the collective taxpayer. And let's consider the fairness angle. Why are we specifically singling out tipped employees for this tax break? What about the elementary school teacher, the retail worker, or the caregiver who also earns a modest income and works incredibly hard? They don't get this special deduction. It creates an uneven playing field in the tax code where two individuals earning similar amounts of money could have vastly different tax burdens just because of their industry. Now, this isn't about criticizing tipped workers, it's about questioning the policy's logic. If the goal is to help low and middle income workers, why not implement broader tax relief, or dare I say it, advocate for a higher livable minimum wage for all workers? This bill feels less like a comprehensive solution and more like a targeted political maneuver, benefiting a specific, visible segment of the workforce while leaving the systemic issues unaddressed. It's like giving one passenger on a sinking ship a slightly better life raft while the ship still goes down.
It has about 25% of its workforce in tipped jobs, thanks in part to the gaming industry, whose dealers make enough money to benefit from the provision.
And because it's a tax deduction, it inherently benefits the people who are making the most income, because the more income you make, the more tips you make, the more you have to deduct from your taxable income.
Tips are how Nevadans pay their rent, cover their groceries, take care of their families, their kids. And Nevada has more tipped workers per capita than any other state. So this bill would mean immediate financial relief for countless hardworking families.
I think it's going to make a real difference for waiters and waitresses and bartenders and taxi cab drivers, Uber drivers and barbers and hairstylists.
For us, that's huge. I think that that's a great way to make a big impact on our team's take-home pay.
Gusto Research conducted a study that suggested the no tax on tips provision will be good for employee retention in small businesses.
Our study found that replacing a tipped employee costs about $8,000. And that's because small businesses have to post a new job. They have decreased productivity while their headcount is below what it should be. And then they have decreased productivity as they're training new employees to come up to speed. All in all, that comes to about $8,000 for the small business to pay to replace any one employee. But we do expect, small businesses to be able to hold on to their employees longer because they're making more money.
But experts suggest no tax on tips could be detrimental in the long run.
We don't like the tax code to treat two taxpayers that are otherwise the same differently. And the way that this bill works, a tipped worker who works in a restaurant receives potentially a tax cut that an elementary school teacher does not, simply because she doesn't work for tips. She works for wages.
When you're misclassifying people and you are avoiding those taxes by having people labeled as independent contractors and so on, the community suffers as well from the lost tax revenue, which of course goes into your schools and road repairs and so on.
Only about 2.5% of workers in the US are tipped. So that already limits substantially the number of workers who can possibly benefit from this policy. And then on top of that, more than a third of tipped workers actually don't receive enough income annually to even file federal tax.
Now, this is the mic drop moment, isn't it? We just heard that only about 2.5% of the US workforce are tipped employees, and more than a third of those don't even earn enough to file federal taxes. Let that sink in. If a significant portion of the very people this bill is supposedly designed to help don't even pay federal income tax, then this no tax on tips provision is completely meaningless for them. It's like building a bridge to an island where half the residents already have boats. It sounds good in theory, but for a huge chunk of the target audience, it's just irrelevant. This exposes a fundamental flaw in the bill's stated purpose of helping low-income workers. If they're already not paying federal income tax, they gain absolutely zero benefit from a federal income tax deduction. So who does benefit? Mostly those higher earning tipped workers, often in places like high-end restaurants or casinos, who do make enough to hit those tax brackets. While they certainly deserve fair compensation, this bill doesn't address the plight of the struggling server making just above the $2.13 federal tip minimum wage, a wage that, let's remember, hasn't changed since 1996 and is now worth less than half its original value due to inflation. This isn't a solution for the majority of low-income tipped workers. It's a band-aid for some, a bonus for others, and a complete non-factor for many of the most vulnerable. If we truly want to help these workers, the conversation needs to shift from tax deductions to guaranteed living wages. Because stable income, not volatile tips or selective tax breaks, is what truly pulls people out of economic precarity. Otherwise, we're just rearranging the deck chairs while the ship of economic inequality keeps sailing on.
Most guests CNBC spoke with suggest a better way to help tipped employees is to guarantee them wages.
I'm able to recognize we're not just going to completely get rid of tipping culture in the country, and maybe we shouldn't, but I don't think we should be moving towards more tipping culture rather than less of it than we already have now.
A better way to help low-income workers is to increase that minimum wage. They can still work for tips, but we just increase the amount of their income that is guaranteed, because again, what they suffer from is volatility in tip income, and we want to pull them into more stable earning streams.
It's really, really important for those of us that are actively working to make tipping not so much a crucial part of our talented team members' paychecks, to continue to push for better systems, higher minimum wages, and other ways where we can ensure that our industry is valued.
Several states allow employers to pay their tipped employees the federal cash minimum wage of $2.13 an hour, last amended in 1996. $2.13 in January of 1996 is now worth $1.04 in November of 2025. Multiply that over 2,080 hours worked in a year, and annual wages are more than halved, going from almost $4,500 to just over $2,000 before taxes.
I think the sub-minimum tipped wage needs to be eliminated altogether. I think it is a way to continue to drive down wages and keep the inequity between front of house and back of house.
The Department of Labor has seen cases where employers don't pay employees their tips fairly. The Labor Department's Wage and Hour Division noted it recovered more than $273 million in back wages in fiscal year 24. With increased wages comes labor cost challenges for employers.
If you jack up the cost of wages, what the small business owner will do is replace a human being with a machine. And so you look at, particularly in places like California, you go in and order on an iPad. Why? Because you don't have to pay that iPad anything per hour.
So you have a bunch of restaurants in Seattle right now who are looking at a minimum wage of over $20 an hour, and that's putting their labor line over 40%, which isn't a sustainable way to operate a business. And the restaurateurs are saying, we know housing prices are too high. We know we need to compensate our people well. And at the same time, we don't know how to do this and keep the businesses open.
The restaurant community is working on finding an innovative pay model that allows businesses to thrive while paying employees fair wages. They believe auto gratuities and service charges, two ideas excluded from no tax on tips, could be it.
If the Fed's going to say, we want to help restaurant workers, period, we need them to tweak some things in the regulations as written to both come in line with federal labor law, to override some of the things that states are doing, and to allow those service charges and auto grats.
By the current draft not being inclusive of auto gratuities and service charges really causes a lot of missteps. I think auto gratuities and service charges are able to be shared with the entirety of the team, the entirety of the staff, whereas traditional tips really only benefit the customer-facing staff members.
To the people that they were really wanting this bill to touch on, the people that, because they're trying to appeal to like service industry workers or middle-class workers or even low-income workers, it doesn't affect them. And it's like waving keys in front of their face and hoping that it persuades them. And it did, it worked, so.
thinking back to sort of wage protections and worker protections, we have for a long time been trying to push away from tip income because, again, for low-income households, that can be, because there's no guarantee on how much you earn, like a minimum wage, a very volatile source of income.
Relying on tips is something I would love to not have to do as a small business owner, and I think we've navigated a really wonderful way to rely on them less and less in our last almost 17 years in operation.
It was drafted through 2028 just in terms of the scoring process. But I think this is something that will be powerful, will be popular, people will like. And I have a high level of confidence that Congress is going to extend it.
So, what have we learned about this no tax on tips provision? It's a policy that, while sounding appealing on the surface, ultimately feels like a political quick fix rather than a systemic solution. It offers a tax break to some particularly higher earning tipped workers, but leaves many of the most vulnerable behind, especially those who already don't pay federal income tax. It sidesteps the crucial conversation about sub-minimum wages, the volatility of tip income, and the fundamental question of who should be responsible for ensuring workers earn a living wage. Is it the customer, the employer, or the government through a fairer tax system and stronger labor laws? This bill, while well-intentioned in its rhetoric, essentially shifts the burden and avoids tackling the root causes of economic insecurity for service industry workers. What do you think? Is no tax on tips a step in the right direction, or is it just another distraction from the real issues facing our service economy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into California politics and beyond, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.